Welcome to this explainer. Today we're jumping straight into the dark, decaying underbelly of one of gaming's most legendary worlds. The Kingdom of Lordran from the 2011 classic Dark Souls is mostly famous for these picturesque, glittering spires and epic castles. But if you talk to absolutely anyone who has actually played it, there is one single name that immediately triggers a visceral, almost involuntary shudder: Blighttown. It is a location that's infamous, oppressive, and, as we're going to explore today, it's an absolute masterclass in emotional and structural design.
Okay, let's dive into this, because it really is a fascinating phenomenon. Why does a digital swamp cause so much real-world dread? I mean, if you look at community discussions, the shared trauma players feel when entering this area is incredibly real. This isn't just a tough level, right? It's an environment that actively works to stifle any feeling of safety. The second you step foot into its darkness, you are meant to feel isolated, overwhelmed, and just flat out punished. But to understand why it's so effective, we first got to understand exactly what kind of environment we're dealing with here.
So a poison swamp is a recurring hostile environment in From Software games designed specifically to slow your movement, inflict damage over time, and psychologically oppress you. Blighttown isn't just another swamp, though. For so many players, it's the quintessential blueprint for this grueling video game trope. You're not just fighting monsters down there, you are literally fighting the environment itself. The very ground you walk on is hostile, forcing you to constantly manage your health while just trying to navigate a labyrinth. And speaking of navigation, let's look at what exactly is trying to kill you.
Just think about this absolute gauntlet of hazards you're thrown into. First, you're suspended high in the air on these vertigo-inducing wavy stilt bridges that are literally swaying under your feet. While you're trying to balance on those, you're being swarmed by infinitely respawning mosquitoes, which, by the way, one hilarious Reddit user perfectly described as the cliff racers of Dark Souls. If that's not bad enough, you've got stealthy blow dart snipers shooting at you from the shadows, grotesque fire-breathing dogs rushing you, and waiting at the very bottom of the pit, a thick, venomous sludge that actually drains your stamina faster if you try to roll through it. It's this pitch-perfect nightmare of insects, poison, and dirty water. But there is one hazard here that stands head and shoulders above the rest in terms of sheer cruelty.
So the crucial point is that massive number right there, 4,200. That is the total damage dealt by the toxic status effect from just a single dart from those stealthy blow dart snipers we just talked about. If you get hit and your toxic meter fills up, your health will rapidly drain for a grueling 3 straight minutes until it hits that 4,200 damage mark. Actually, to put that into perspective, that is guaranteed death for almost any player at that stage of the game, no question. And to cure it, you need specific items that are incredibly hard to find, forcing a lot of first-time players to frantically backtrack for hours just to survive. But as terrifying as the in-game mechanics are, the real-world technical performance used to be just as scary.
Let's contrast the original 2011 release with the 2018 remastered edition for a second. Back in 2011, the game systems literally couldn't handle From Software's ambitions for this level. The heavily vertical structure and just the sheer access of objects on screen caused massive frame rate drops, resulting in what players accurately described as an unplayable slideshow. You were essentially fighting the console's hardware on top of fighting a toxic swamp. Thankfully, the 2018 remastered edition fixed all this, allowing the game to run at high, stable frame rates. And it's kind of ironic, right? Removing those original technical flaws actually allowed players to finally appreciate the brilliant, ambitious design that was hiding beneath all that lag.
Because all of these hazards are built into an absolute architectural masterpiece, Blighttown operates on an iceberg approach, forcing a literal and thematic descent that masterfully builds this incredible sense of claustrophobia. First, you start in the damp, dark depths, a horrifying sewer level. From there, you go even further down into the crumbling, shaky scaffolding of Blighttown itself. Then, you finally hit the poisonous swamp floor, only to realize you have to go deeper still into a cavern known as Quelaag's Domain. This intense downward progression tests your willingness to challenge yourself, constantly intensifying your feelings of isolation because you are moving further and further away from the safety of the surface.
And how did they build this sprawling, vertical nightmare? I was absolutely amazed to discover a finding from Dark Souls modder Grimrook. The entire structure of Blighttown is made up of just 10 reused wood assets. Yep, you heard that right. 5 panels, 3 posts, and 2 planks. That is it. It is completely mind-blowing that developers were able to create such a complex, towering, vertical labyrinth, a place that feels endlessly oppressive and visually overwhelming, out of practically nothing. It really speaks volumes about the sheer ingenuity of their level design. And this brilliantly illustrates how Blighttown isn't just a pit you fall into, it's actually the masterful connective tissue of the entire game world. Think about it. It links directly to the depths above, while a massive water wheel acts as an exit into the Valley of Drakes, which leads right into the New Londo ruins. Plus, hidden within a massive tree in the swamp is a secret path to the Great Hollow and the breathtaking Ash Lake. And below the boss lair, the fiery demon ruins. This oppressive swamp is literally holding the lower half of the Kingdom of Lodran together like a giant rotting web.
Now, because of how beautifully interconnected the world is, the game actually allows for a massive subversion of traditional linear level design. If you choose a specific starting item called the Master Key, savvy veterans can execute a total sequence break. They can completely skip that terrifying upper scaffolding we talked about earlier, taking a literal back door through the Valley of Drakes to drop right down into the swamp. It's a phenomenal feature that rewards deep knowledge of the world, letting you bypass the intended descent entirely if you're brave enough.
But as we shift to the deepest layer of our descent here, we really have to look at the lore. What actually is this place? Well, according to dedicated lore hunters, Blighttown is a forgotten shantytown that essentially became a deposit for the sewage and runoff from the shining cities above it. The people down here, they're the banished, the outcasts, the laborers who are forced to live in the literal waste of the kingdom. The environment isn't just gross for the sake of being gross, it tells a profound visual story of societal neglect and decay.
And at the very bottom of this societal dumping ground, we uncover two incredibly tragic figures, Chaos Witch Quelaag and her unnamed sister, commonly known as the Fair Lady. They're daughters of the Witch of Izalith, who fled to Blighttown after their mother's botched magical experiment mutated them into half-human, half-spider demons. When they finally arrived in Blighttown looking for refuge, they found a population of outcasts suffering from terrible plagues and pestilence.
Now, what's really interesting about this specific detail is how the lore completely flips your emotional understanding of the entire area. The Fair Lady felt such profound empathy for the disease-ridden residents of Blighttown that she willingly absorbed their toxic plague into her own body. Because she did this, her health rapidly deteriorated. She lost her eyesight and now lives in constant, agonizing pain, completely immobile, just to save her followers. When you realize this, man, it changes everything. This horrible toxic dumping ground actually holds a story of incredible heartbreaking sacrifice.
Which brings us to her sister, Quelaag. When you finally reach the end of the swamp, Quelaag is the terrifying boss you have to fight. She attacks you relentlessly with lava and fire. But knowing the lore, you realize she isn't just some mindless monster. She is a desperate sister, ruthlessly hunting intruders to harvest their humanity, a precious essence in the game, so she can stockpile it to relieve the Fair Lady's suffering. The epic boss fight at the end of this grueling level is literally just you murdering a woman who is trying to harvest medicine to ease her siblings' torture. It totally takes your frustration and turns it into pure empathy.
Zooming out for a second, we can see how Blighttown fits into a much larger gaming legacy. Game director Hidetaka Miyazaki has a recurring, honestly almost infamous, obsession with these toxic environments. It all started back in 2009 with the Valley of Defilement in Demon Souls, evolved into Blighttown in 2011, became Fair and Keep in 2016 for Dark Souls 3, and expanded into massive, numerous swamps in 2022's Elden Ring. But Blighttown? That was the moment this design philosophy truly cemented itself in gaming culture. It became the yardstick against which all future suffering in these games would be measured.
So all of this leaves us with one final provocative question to think about. Does a video game level actually have to be fun to be considered a masterpiece of design? I mean, Blighttown is agonizing. It is oppressive. It severely tests your patience with toxic sludge and vertical drops. But through its ingenious use of just a handful of wood assets, its masterfully interconnected geography, and a deeply tragic lore that evokes genuine dread and profound empathy, it achieves exactly what it sets out to do. Perhaps the pain of Blighttown proves that art in games isn't just about easy entertainment. It's about evoking powerful, unforgettable feelings. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.